getting on my nerves.
I have a knack for that.
You have a train to catch.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of the world, we are back here again to talk about the next Spider-Man movie in theaters. Yeah, Spider-Man 2. If you haven't seen it before, it's godlike. It's incredible. And I hope you got the opportunity to see it in theaters this time around, because everything's better when you get to see it on the big screen, you know? Better audio, better visuals, better experience with the fandom around you. It's just a better all-around experience. So, Spider-Man 2 is what we're going to be talking about, because I recently just saw this mofo in theaters, and I loved it. As an adaptation, it's phenomenal. As a movie overall, it's freaking 10 out of 10. It could be one of my favorite, if not my favorite Spider-Man movie ever made. Maybe one of my all-time favorite movies all time. Honestly, I love this freaking movie. Now again, the goal is to break down each and every one of these movies based on how accurate they are to the comics. I already broke down the first film, and you can check it out here. And if you want, you can talk to me about it on Discord. Today, let's focus up now, people. Let's actually break down Spider-Man 2 as an adaptation. The movie's peak. It's straight up heat. Everything about it is just awesome. Amazing, even. So many different converging storylines all at the same time. Overarching storylines from the first film. Brand new storylines in this film. Storylines that set up the next film. Pretty much every actor in this movie understood the assignment, yo. They did their freaking thing. But how is Spider-Man 2 as an adaptation? I think it's godlike, personally. But let's break it down. We're not going to focus on Spider-Man or Spider-Man 3. Just Spider-Man 2 today, people. Is Spider-Man 2 a good comic adaptation? Let's discuss. Starting with Spider-Man. There's a lot to talk about here. This isn't like a brand new Spider-Man. He's been Spider-Man for 2 years in this role already. And he's really becoming his own hero. You know, he's coming into his own. But at the same time, he isn't moving or progressing much as Peter. He now lives alone in an apartment since Harry moved back home. This man really loses himself to the life of Spider-Man, to the extent it's actually hurting his personal life to an extreme amount. The movie starts off with man's late for work, and then he loses his job for it. He completely misses his class and gets called out for it by his professor on the campus sidewalk. Like, that's a burn, man. That hurts. Then he goes home, he gets a surprise party thrown for him, and he doesn't even know why. He forgot it was his own freaking birthday, man. He really is going all in on the Spider-Man aspect of his life from the very beginning of this movie. He heard Uncle Ben's words, and he took those things to heart and pushed onwards. Spider-Man just takes over Peter's life. He won't even tell the woman he loves that he loves her, because he knows how wrapped up in Spider-Man he is, and it could put her in a lot of danger. And you get like all of this characterization right away. It's freaking peak Spider-Man stuff. Like, this is comic accuracy. It's unbelievably accurate. Do you want to see Parker luck? There's like a 5-minute streak in this movie where it's the literal most down bad a Spider-Man has ever been. Just L after L after L after L. It's insane. Peter as a character just has the everlasting guilt just down pat. You know, he exemplifies it so well throughout this entire movie. It's so Spider-Man. The story progresses onward, and Peter begins to experience a loss of his powers due to him, you know, having a mental block.
Oh no. No. Ah!
His life started to go so badly that even his Spider-Man life started to suffer from it. Peter quits being Spider-Man, and we get maybe the most accurate live-action scene we'll ever see. Like, it's one of the most iconic panels alone. And then you put it side by side with the live-action movie. This is phenomenal, man. Like, this is accuracy. This is what we want to see.
No, Uncle Ben. I'm just Peter Parker. I'm Spider-Man. No more.
However, I have to point out that Spider-Man doesn't lose his powers in the comics like he does in the movies. He doesn't have like a mental block and stop being able to shoot webs. I mean, he makes his own web shooter, so that wouldn't even make sense in the comics. What happens in the comics is the entire city feels like it's turning on Spider-Man, at least to Spider-Man, because of what J. Jonah Jameson's putting in the newspaper. It feels like all of his hard work isn't really paying off to anything. So he's like, I'm giving up. I'm done with this. Overall, it's a very freaking accurate scene, though. Like, look at it, man. Spider-Man in this movie exemplifies what it means to be great power comes great responsibility. He's a super genius, and he shows off his smarts to Doc Ock and ends up being right. We get both smart Peter and responsible Spider-Man. The quip department is lacking again, I must admit it. There's this.
Here's your change!
But yeah, not really much else. He does end up with MJ at the end, though, and this is such a freaking massive plus. I cannot understate it at all. Spider-Man and MJ are two halves of the freaking biggest Marvel Comics couple ever. They need to be together. So it's great that they ended together in this movie. I love it. This adaptation overall, man, it's just freaking amazing, dude. It's amazing. You give this man a few more quips, and it's perfect. Literally, it's perfect. Doc Ock. Doc Ock is a tad bit different than how he's portrayed in the comics. He's a bit more sympathetic and tragic in the Raimi films than he is in the comics. In 616, there's no, inhibitor chip that's supposed to stop AI tentacles from, getting to Doc Ock's brain. He's just a kind of a bad dude. And that is probably the biggest crux of the character and where they differ. In the movie, he's shown to be egotistical prior to even having the inhibitor fried, but at the same time, he also has moments of modesty and humility.
I still don't understand what he was talking about.
Oh, come on.
I'm serious. T.S. Eliot is more complicated than advanced science.
He talks about how his wife might even be smarter than him, and she's a literature major. He can give other people credit, so it's hard to believe that this guy is just straight up evil and ruthless. Why he becomes evil and ruthless is because he made an inhibitor chip, and the inhibitor chip gets fried, and then the AI gets to his brain. This causes Doc Ock to, be way angrier and way more evil. But in the comics, the dude's just a dick. I mean, that's a bit OD. He didn't have the best childhood, and he's trying to do a lot of what he does in the name of science, but he doesn't really have enough compassion or care for others. These guys see the world totally different. Doc Ock in the Raimi films was creating the power of the sun so that you can create energy for cheap, and everybody who is alive can have access to energy now. He did this like a humanitarian. He was trying to help people. Whereas Doc Ock in 616 comics is more so just doing it so he can say he did it, and it's his greatest achievement. He's super full of himself. He's a very pompous villain. It's always been about his life's work, and he's got to complete it. They do both attempt to create a renewable energy source. They definitely had that in common. But their motivations were just completely different. Even their designs don't really match up. Doc Ock in the comics has a lot of iconic outfits, and Raimi's Doc Ock just doesn't wear any of them. Man just goes out there shirtless. I personally think Alfred Molina would have looked so baller if you gave him the white suit. Alfred Molina did put up an impeccable performance as Doc Ock, though. It'll go down as one of the greatest supervillain portrayals of all time. It's just not too comic accurate, It's got a lot of differences and liberties taken on the character. MJ. This time around, I think MJ is adapted pretty well. She cheats again, and that's annoying, but everything else is freaking perfect. This could be a hot take, honestly, because I know a lot of people do not like Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane, but I personally feel a lot of that stems from just misogyny. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. A lot of people just don't like women. These movies, they have her as a flawed character, but flawed characters are all of us. Everybody who lives in this world is a flawed character. Hating on MJ because she has flaws is just the most lame thing you could do. Liking a character for not having flaws is the only lamer thing there is. Specifically focusing on the second film, Mary Jane is like an actual character. She has her own story and she feels way more like Mary Jane from the comics. She's head over heels for Peter. I mean, he's the only man who's ever treated her well up to the beginning of this movie. But Peter is just so focused on trying to be a great Spider-Man that he can't possibly be with Mary Jane. Mary Jane ends up having to try and move on and build a life without him. MJ still has feelings for Peter, but when someone is so adamant that they can't be with you and constantly blows you off, you kind of have to take the hint. She dates another man, and he's a decent guy, but he's not Peter. She then gets mixed up in Ock's madness and then finally uncovers the truth that she kind of knew all along. Peter is Spider-Man, and that's why he tells her he can't be with her. He also explicitly says he loves her and tells her this. It literally happens, explicitly.
I think I always knew. All this time. Who you really were.
Then you know why we can't be together. Spider-Man will always have enemies. I can't let you take that risk.
The movie ends with MJ ditching her wedding in this stunning dress and running off to be with Peter, telling him she's her own person and she wants to make her own choices. This is so freaking MJ, man. A lot of it just feels so like MJ. Now, most of this isn't anything inspired directly from the comics. But personality-wise, it just feels like MJ. She's very headstrong and passionate about what she wants. She's going to go after her goals with every fiber of her freaking being. She looks stunning and great throughout this entire movie as well. It's just the cheating that isn't really it. I'm not going to lie. That's the only thing I don't like. I do think her ditching the wedding is also a bit OD. Call it off beforehand, people. You don't have to show up there and then call it off. You can call it off before people show up. But also, it's not like MJ is like an angel and a perfect girlfriend in the comics either. She has her moments. She's a flawed character in the comics. She's a real character in the comics as well. I just find MJ and Spider-Man 2 to be the best interpretation of the character when we talk about live action. Seeing the iconic couple at the end of the movie together and her saying the iconic line, it just freaking melts my heart, man.
Go get him, Tiger.
Harry Osborn. This is where Harry really begins to tread into the bad adaptation territory, in my opinion. He's just far too harsh on Peter for trying to make money to help out his family and pay bills while he's attending college.
Not to mention your friend the Bug.
Not tonight, Harry.
Every night. Until I find him, it's 24/7.
Until the very end of this movie, Harry had no idea Peter is Spider-Man. None. He knows Peter is dead broke, and because Harry moved back home to the mansion after his father passed away, Peter also had to move out and find a spot of his own. He needs a job. Like, he needs to support himself. That has to happen. And he's always wanted to be a photographer. He said this in the first movie. He wanted to be a photographer. Why is Harry such a dick to his best friend about this? The Bugle never even paints Spider-Man in a good light. To Harry, it should seem like Peter's taking pictures of Spider-Man and all these slanderous words over it. It really should look like Peter does not give a damn about Spider-Man. He doesn't like the guy. He's just doing it for a job. That's not what happens in this adaptation, though. The adaptation just shows Harry being like a super douche to Peter about this whole thing, like he loves Spider-Man or not. And Peter does love Spider-Man, but he also needs to work. I know Harry's a spoiled, rich brat, but you need to understand not everybody has the money you have. The adaptation just shows Harry way too much as a douche, man. Harry in 616 was known to take a lot of his frustrations out on himself. Harry struggled with drug addiction due to how inadequate he felt. He becomes colder and more stoic. Yes, he lashes out at people, but that's not the only emotion he shows. If anything, he's shown way more wallowing in his own self-pity. But in these movies, he's just a dick. A 100% dick. Mans lets Peter save MJ, so you think maybe he begins to see that Peter might just be a good guy. Then he stumbles upon the goblin tech Norman had hidden, and he goes and becomes another goblin. Like, alright then, fine. At least this is accurate if he's going to become the Green Goblin. But no, he doesn't become the Green Goblin. He becomes the new Goblin. It's so stupid. He doesn't even look cool. It's literally so dumb. Next up, Aunt May. In this movie, Aunt May is her absolute best. She still loves Peter and thinks about Ben constantly. She's struggling to make ends meet and pay her bills now that Ben's passed. This is spot on accurate, man. This happens all the time in the comics. I love how heroic she's shown in this movie also. Her helping Peter defeat Doc Ock is such a great scene. I mean, she's like scared half to death hanging up on the side of the building, and she's still fighting through to help Spider-Man. I totally see where Spider-Man gets his courage from. It's gotta run in the family. Her absolute best scene in any of these movies for me, and it feels like it could be taken straight out of the comics.
Just to get a glimpse of the one who taught him to hold on a second longer. I believe there's a hero in all of us that keeps us honest, gives us strength, makes us noble.
This is like the best thing ever. Ever. I love this scene. J. Jonah Jameson.
Hoffman!
This is also the best J. Jonah Jameson we're ever going to get. The man is an absolute menace. He's constantly flaming Spider-Man and trying to tear him down. In this movie specifically, he even talks about how proud he is to make Spider-Man look bad when he's talking to Peter. The movie is just filled with absolute banger moments from J. Jonah Jameson. But if we're going to talk about a moment, we must talk about the Spider-Man No More scene. In the comics, Jonah also gets the suit after Spider-Man retires. In the book, a kid actually runs into the building and gives it to him instead of a homeless man. Both times, though, Jonah is ecstatic to see the wall crawler quit. He's just over the moon. The comic story continues with Spider-Man just coming back, taking his suit, and becoming Spider-Man again, okay? But the movie takes a little bit of a twist and adds more depth to it that I really enjoy. It doesn't feel like it's out of character or bad adaptation. It just feels like if the comics thought about it more, they probably would have included this as well. In the book, Jameson is like stoked Spider-Man's gone, and that's kind of it. After the inner struggle, Peter realizing New York needs Spider-Man, he steals the suit back, and Jameson's just mad at Spider-Man now that Spider-Man's back. He thought he was dead, and he's back, so he's pissed. The movie, it adds way more characterization to the mix for Jameson. In the movie, after some time with Spider-Man being retired, Jameson comes to the thought process that New York City probably needed Spider-Man. Doc Ock had stolen MJ, which was his son's freaking future wife at the time.
I drove Spider-Man away.
He was the only one who could have stopped Octavius.
And Mans was going through it. He's like, I should have known Spider-Man was the only person who could save us. He almost wishes Spider-Man would come back. And then right when he's about to say he does, Spider-Man swoops in and steals his suit back. Then you get to see the same pissed off reaction from Jameson in both stories. It's just more depth, honestly. And it makes Jameson seem more realistic and honestly more akin to his newer adaptations. This Jameson adaptation is freaking phenomenal, people, okay? It's just so good. J.K. Simmons did his thing. The movie overall just does a great job cluing in on what worked in the first film and how to build on it. Make it a better movie this time. Peter felt like he has natural growth and progression. Mary Jane and Aunt May the same. Doc Ock is a brand new villain, But much like the first film, the villain is given a large amount of screen time to really show off why he's such a great villain. Spider-Man 2 as an adaptation is freaking phenomenal, man. To me, this is like the best serious Spider-Man you'll ever get. He's not too goofy all over the place, hopping around and whatnot. He's more reserved and more down to earth, but he still feels like Spider-Man. Spider-Man 2 is a great adaptation, man. What a banger. I'm blessed to have seen it in theaters again. Just an absolute experience. This video was down to be a lot shorter than the last video, I'm not going to lie. A lot of the ideas in Spider-Man 2 are just based off of Spider-Man 1. It's a good, straight-up transition story that just continues the first story very well. But Spider-Man 3 is next. Oh boy, there's a lot to break down in that film. Just so much when we're talking about comic accuracy. I'm gonna flame that hoe. I ain't gonna lie. Dunk out. Peace.